There's three types of people in the world. There's people that make things happen. There's people that watch things happen. And then there's people that say, what happened? And I think we're in this like generational moment with AI. It is moving so fast. An exercise that can take 2 weeks, I can now do in 5 minutes. And you just think about the enormous potential, the unlock, but the big opportunity, the thing that I'm really excited about, not only for our company, but the entire industry and also just the world at large, is what is the potential that we've got ahead of us? And am I going to be a participant in that?
Hi everyone, I'm your host Rohit Bhargava, and you are listening to episode 207 of the Startup Playbook podcast, a weekly series where I sit down with successful tech founders, investors, and operators to unpack their journey, lessons, and insights to help current and future entrepreneurs. The voice that you heard a little bit earlier was that of our guest for this episode, Dean Swan. Dean spent 11 years at Microsoft before moving on to become the country manager at Dropbox. He is now the vice president and general manager across APJ for Monday.com. When he initially joined Monday as the first hire in the region, he set an audacious target of growing his part of the business to $100 million within 5 years, which is an ambitious target considering that the entire business was worth $120 million at the time. Fast forward to today, and he's growing the team to 140, and it's just $2 million short of reaching that target months ahead of schedule. In 2021, Monday.com went public and now boasts a market cap of $15.97 billion. In this episode, we covered a wide range of topics, including how to effectively expand into new markets and territories, how to hire and attract the best talent, how Dean grew the business from $0 to $100 million in the region, the steps Dean takes to perform at his best, which led to him losing over 20 kilograms, and much more. But before we get into this episode, I just wanted to flag that towards the end of this interview, Dean touches on the suicide of a close colleague that led to him reevaluating his life and making meaningful changes that have allowed him to live a happier and healthier life both mentally and physically. I mention this not just because it might be a sensitive topic for a number of our listeners, but also because it highlights an uncomfortable truth, which is that so often we wait for a significant event for us to reevaluate our own life and our priorities. For so many of us that are driven and ambitious by our work, we make a number of unconscious trade-offs in the pursuit of our goals that can lead to an impact on our long-term success and our well-being. And this is one of the reasons why I launched the Como Club, which is an 8-week program designed to help people like you and me achieve high performance and well-being in all areas of our life. The program features world-class speakers with lived experience, weekly workshops to teach you the tools and frameworks you need, and a curated peer group community of people to support you and provide the accountability you need to reach your goals. Applications for Cohort 1 are now open, and you can find out more and apply at the Como Club, which is thekomoclub.com, or you can reach out to me directly at rohit@startupplaybook.co. This is an area that I'm deeply passionate about, and so if you want to apply for the program, have any questions, or just want to reach out and have a chat, please feel free to do so. All right, without further ado, here is my interview with Dean Swan. Hi, Dean. Welcome to the Startup Playbook podcast, and thanks so much for taking the time to be on the show today.
Hey, Rohit. Good to catch up.
Appreciate you flying down specifically for this. So very excited about this chat. But Dean, for those people that may not be as familiar with you and your background, do you want to share a little bit about your story and what got you here today?
Yeah, sure. So Dean Swan, I'm the vice president and general manager of Monday.com for Asia. Bit of my background, I came to Australia as an international student. So I actually studied computer science at Macquarie University and majored in machine learning and natural language programming, which is very topical today. But back then when I graduated was the .com bust, so probably the worst time to be entering into the workforce. I've spent 25 years in the tech industry, working for companies like Microsoft and Dropbox. I've been a startup founder, and then the last 5 years been building Monday.com in Asia, which has been an incredible journey.
Yeah, and so many parts of your story that I want to dig into. But from what I understand, you grew up in South Africa, and you had two other potential career paths that you were tossing up as well, a game ranger and an architect. And moving into software, very different set of interests. I guess, was that always a thing for you? I guess exploring different areas and different topics.
Yeah, quite eclectic taste. I think as the architecture side of it came through because I sort of see myself as a creative person and was really enamored with that industry and buildings and so on. And then as a game ranger, I think most boys growing up in that part of the world, that's maybe like a natural career aspiration.
I hear you're a bit of a chef as well.
Yes, yeah. I kept that one under wraps.
I know you did. Tell me about that. What was that like?
Yeah, so I actually fell into chefing by accident. So when I was in South Africa, I did my first year of a university degree in marketing. Yeah. And I actually didn't complete that first year. I was studying and working full time, and ended up door knocking for work. And I was walking around door knocking for work. And one of the businesses that I door knocked on was a restaurant. And one of the owners just happened to be one of my former university mates. And I was looking for work, and he said, yeah, come. I was looking for bar work, and he said, come in. Yeah, we can do with the barman. I started as a barman, and then about a month later, the guys were like, hey, like, we need help in the kitchen. We've got this expanding restaurant empire. Do you want to come and learn the ropes in the kitchen? I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go do it. And ended up being a chef in a professional kitchen. I had 21 staff, so it wasn't a small operation, but hell of a hard work, right? I think being a chef maybe might set you up well for being a startup guy, right? Because it's long hours, lots of hard graft.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think there's so many just seemingly random things from our past that we kind of get involved with that I think actually translate and carry over to either perspectives or just skills that we sort of carry on. My mum had a restaurant and a cafe in Canberra, so I totally get just the chaos and just the amount of work that was there. Are there any, like, looking back, are there any particular things that you sort of learnt through that time period that kind of help you in terms of how you sort of think about organization, managing teams, and things like that?
I think there was some competencies I built in that time. Perseverance would be one of them, because being a chef, it's really long days, hard graft. I remember I'd open up the restaurant at 8:30 in the morning, and I'd finish up at maybe 11 o'clock at night. Very limited social life, so you tend to socialize after you finish work. So maybe you're getting to bed at midnight, 1 in the morning, and then you get up and you do it all again. And so I think just finding another gear within yourself and being able to be persistent. I think the other thing is, that industry, the margins are super tight, right? So like you got to have like real attention to detail. You also got to have like good systems in place as well. So you think about, when you're ordering and when you're just setting things up, and there's a science to that as well to build a profitable business. And I think that's probably carried through for me when I think about the attention to detail that I've got on things, and because I know it matters.
And I guess kind of going back to that whole pathway where you had multiple different options. Clearly you had this early career in the restaurant and chefing, and you had this, I guess like childhood ambition to either be a game ranger or an architect. What was kind of the ultimate sort of deciding factor to go down tech specifically?
Yeah. So back then a lot of my family members worked for IBM, so that was part of the third option and aspiration was to be a computer programmer. And when I was a young boy, my mum bought me my first computer. It was an Amstrad, and I used to spend my time just writing very basic code, drawing shapes and all that sort of thing. And I used to call my grandmother over because I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when I was growing up, and I'd be very proud of this piece of code I'd written to draw a bubble on the screen and color it in and all that sort of thing. So I think that was still there. And we had an opportunity as a family to move to Australia, and my stepdad at the time said, hey, you can move to Australia and you can follow your passion, and I'll put you through university. And that's where the journey began there, and decided to get into computer science.
Yeah. And from what I understand, from after doing that sort of computer science degree, you moved into sales?
Yes.
In tech?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I guess is, it's not the most kind of common pathway. And, I imagine that having technical knowledge when you're selling technical product is such a huge advantage. But again, not a very sort of common approach or kind of pathway that kind of people take after doing a computer science degree.
Yeah.
What was that like? And I guess, again, what were some of the advantages or disadvantages of kind of understanding both sides?
I'd like to say it was by choice, but it was actually by necessity and chance, right? Because when I left uni, it was the dot-com bust. And I was looking for work experience or first job as a developer. And I ended up getting Yellow Pages. We don't really use the Yellow Pages anymore, but just trying to find companies, technology companies, and then ringing them and seeing if they had work experience. And I ended up finding a company that was saying, look, we don't do any of our development in Australia, but we're looking for salespeople. Do you want to come in and do inside sales? And I remember thinking, and then speaking to a mentor and said, look, just get us started in the industry and you can figure it out from there. And that's how I started. I started in inside sales, and that became a path for me. And then from there, ended up at Microsoft and spent 11 years at Microsoft. And part of that was in sales, part of it was in marketing, part of it was in channel, and sort of just broadened out from there.
11 years at Microsoft, especially during that time, must have been just such a hugely valuable learning experience. What was that like over the 11 years of not just kind of developing your own career, but also, I guess, absorbing so much information of a company of that size?
Look, I'd say it's, for me personally, it's like getting an MBA in the software industry, right? The biggest software company in the world, so diverse, and being able to do so many different roles within that organization. I joined at the time where the changing of the guard was going from Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer. And then when I left Microsoft, we had the changing of the guard from the Ballmer era to the Satya Nadella era. I saw the culture and the focus change during that time. But also as a company going through enormous change. If you think about their product offering, it was very much about that sort of desktop server era and then moving into the cloud. And they weren't by any means the first mover, right? The first movers were the Googles and the Amazons with AWS, and they were playing catch up. And it was a great time to be at a company when they're really having to think about that massive pivot. I remember being at a conference, and at the time Microsoft had, I think it was about 45,000 developers, and Satya came in and he spoke about how he sent a memo on a Friday to all the developers, and they said, on Monday when you come into work, if you're not working on code that is orientated around the cloud, you got to just down tools and move on to projects that are going to take us into the cloud, right? So such a large organization being so decisive and being able to move. And in many ways, when I was with the operation, with cloud, it was like trying to play catch up, right? And then just taking the company through that transition in terms of their products. When I was at Microsoft, we had launched Azure, and sort of then the go-to-market associated with that, building the Microsoft channel around Azure. Microsoft in Australia had more than 10,000 partners. So how do you take a channel on that journey and work with them in terms of how they're going to reorientate their businesses around that opportunity? So it was fantastic to go through that and being able to figure out how do you affect change in such a large organization, but also in such a large channel.
What does that look like? Because it can be exceptionally difficult for a company of that size to, as you said, sort of affect change. What were, I guess, like some of the learnings of understanding how the sort of big machine operates?
I think it is a machine. So I think that's like the right characterization of it, right? And it started with the leaders being very decisive around, well, we need to go here and we need to move there quickly. And so, that example I shared with Satya and moving all of the engineers in such a large population on a dime in that way. When you think about the channel, I think one of the learnings there was educating them not on the product, but on the why, and educating them on the domain. Like, how do you change your business to be a cloud business? What does it look like in terms of your organizational design? What does it look like in terms of the services that you're going to bring to market? How are you going to monetize that? How is it dynamically different to an on-premise world or a world where you're selling and delivering very large, chunky projects to the world of the cloud where it's smaller, it's more agile, it's delivering value faster? So I think they did that really well because they had a whole program of how they think about that. And I'd say, change agents like such are coming in and having a very different approach from a culture perspective, right? I'd say in the Barmer era, it was probably more of a sales culture, and in the Satya Nadella era, it was more of a product culture and focused on the product and the craft of the product. And I think there's a different attention in companies like that. I mean, that's what I loved about, and I love about Monday, is our founders are not sales founders, they are product founders, and there's a different attention and emphasis that they place on the product, on the customer experience, and so on. It's not leading with the dollar first, it's leading with the product first.
One thing that I'd love to sort of get your perspective on is, oftentimes we kind of talk about how much of that culture is shaped by the founders and the leadership on the way down. I think with startups, there's generally much shorter sort of life cycle within that. And it's usually the founders kind of riding that entire journey. But from your perspective in kind of seeing those transitionary periods between different CEOs and different leadership, what does that look like in not just kind of setting the strategy or the direction, whether it be sales or product, but in terms of distilling that down to the rest of the leaders and the rest of the teams down? What does that look like when it's done efficiently or not so efficiently?
Yeah. It's a great question because, if I think about the journey at Monday for myself over the last 5 years, right? So when I started building Monday in Asia, it was me, I say in my lounge room. It wasn't actually my lounge room because my wife wouldn't let me use one of the kids' bedrooms as an office. So she made me set up my office in the walk-in wardrobe. So culture's not really top of mind, right? But as I'm building the team and, we grew incredibly fast, right? So we went from myself to then a team of 4 or 5 people in 2020. And mind you, we were doing it during COVID. And the original plan was by 2021 to have a team of 7. And we ended up having a team of 70 people by the end of 2021. So I bring it back to culture because, through that rapid growth, I think culture, when you're a team of 5, just happens organically. Like you're not really thinking about, well, how do people get to know one another? How do you build that sense of community? It just happens, right? Like you're having stand-ups every day. When there's a new hire that joins the team, everyone knows them. They know everyone within the first 5 minutes of doing introductions. I remember when we used to have new people that I'd hire, I'd go up into the attic, I'd get the monitor, I'd get the laptop, I'd get the swag bag, I'd pack the swag bag, and I'd write them a note, and I'd say, hey, welcome to the rocket ship. We're going to build something amazing. And I'd pack it, and I'd get the Zoom courier and send it out to them. And so the employee experience is very different in that instance, but that doesn't scale, right? And then you need to think about culture in a more deliberate way, right? And, I find myself now, we've got 140 people on the team. I spend a lot of time thinking about culture in terms of what are the deliberate actions that we're going to take. So now when we have a cohort of new people joining the business, I have to think about, well, how do we have a mix-up? Let's put something in the calendar where we can have the new team members get together and they can meet a lot of the other team in a friendly, relaxed environment. How are we going to get a profile of them and share that on Slack so everyone can know who they are and what part of the team they've joined? I think about things like, those values that really central to our success as a company, the cultural values. We talk a lot about speed and execution and ownership and impact. Now, when we were a small team, I think that we just had that, the DNA of the people that are hired in that sort of early phase. They were people that were very passionate about building, right? And you had no other option. You had to own things, right? You couldn't just delegate it off to someone else or just say, well, that, someone else's job. It wouldn't get done, So, when we were starting up, I didn't have an IT person, ordering the equipment. I had to go order the equipment. I had to pack the swag bags. I didn't have a workplace manager. I had to go, get quotes for health insurance and all of that sort of stuff. So ownership and impact just came naturally through, that stage. But now when you've got 140 people, it's like, how do we instill that ownership and impact as we scale, and how do we scale our culture? So it's a lot of these deliberate actions now, and to think about, okay, well, how do we do that? Obviously, when you're hiring, how do you still test for some of those core principles? that we want to see? How do we test for that core DNA? And then, the other thing I'd say with culture, because I think people, it's a very broad topic, right? And some people think about culture as vibe. It's like, what's it like to work at Monday.com? And, and when I come into the office, what's the office environment like? What's the swag? What are the benefits? All that sort of stuff. And then other people think of culture as behaviors and values. And I think it's both, right? It's so people can feel the culture when they come in. Do you have a team that's really engaged? And so you work on that very deliberately as well. Again, that just doesn't happen organically when you're a much larger team. So, how do you cultivate that vibe and that workplace experience? And then on the other side, the behaviors, and how do you cultivate those behaviors, and how do you make sure that those behaviors scale as you scale and they're persistent? And we do things like, we've got a culture crew. So, culture's not just in my hands. Culture's in the hands of the entire team, but we also have this culture crew who have a pulse on what are the things that we're doing, or what are the things that we're not doing, or what should we start doing to really continue to enhance our culture and enhance our values. We have things like spirit animals. And so the team came up with an idea, said, look, we've got our cultural values. Let's have these spirit animals, which are reward and recognition for people that really embody that and show up in that way. So those are the more, I'd say, deliberate things now that we're a larger team and a larger organization, and we need to scale our culture as we grow.
I'm sure there's a lot of listeners of this podcast that are either in the process of expanding out to different countries and different parts of the world, or have ambitions to do that in the near future. Just really curious from your perspective, having done that for both Dropbox and Monday now, how much of that, when you're expanding overseas and kind of building these teams in different countries that have different cultures and things like that, how much of the overall company culture is from the top down of wherever sort of the main sort of headquarters are, versus using that as a base and being able to localize the culture and the approach that you kind of have for that specific team?
Yeah. That's my world over the last couple of years, because if you have a look at Monday today, we've got the office in Sydney, and that serves as our regional HQ for the region. We've got the office in Melbourne, and about 2 years ago, I opened up our office in Tokyo. And I remember being in our headquarters with Roy and Iran, our founders, and I was just explaining to them, I said, hey guys, be prepared. This is going to be like a multi-year journey, and everything that we are as a culture and as a company, Japan's on the opposite end of that scale. We talk about iterate our way to perfection, be scrappy. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we'll build on it, and we'll get to perfection. I spoke about speed and execution, it's, the emphasis on getting things done really quickly and having that immediate impact. Whereas in Japanese culture, it's more precise. It takes a long time for decisions to be made. There's a lot of consensus that has to be built up. They've got this term called namawashi. And namawashi is, if you think about it from a sales perspective, you have to consult everyone through all levels, or everyone that's impacted. So these processes take a long time. And I remember Roy saying to me, this is our co-founder, he said, well, Dean, that we're not patient, so I'm sure you'll figure out a way to hack it. So I was like, well, we'll talk again in a couple of years. So I think within that context, going into Japan and then trying to get that right balance with, okay, well, what is the culture of how business gets done there, right? And learning about that and appreciating that, well, I might need to have 3 or 4 meetings with a potential partner or a potential customer, because it is a lot about respect. It's a lot about trust. It's a lot about confidence. I think it's a lot about consistency as well. But once you have built that up, and once they come on board as a customer and you fulfill your end of the bargain, you deliver a great product or service, they become customers for life. So in a way, it's like it takes a long time to get to that point, but it persists and it stays, and that's a great outcome for us. I think I had to really learn about what's the right balance between how do you hire people for the local culture, but at the same time also bring some of the DNA that you need to bring to be successful in that market, because there's a reason why Monday is successful, right? And there's traits in terms of how we operate. How do I bring that into the market while at the same time respect the local market? So what does that look like? So when we hire people in Japan, I'm looking for bicultural and bilingual people, right? Bilingual because obviously there's a lot of interaction with our HQ, and that market needs a lot of support from our HQ teams when you think about localizing the product, not just translating it, but like truly localizing it, localizing our marketing, understanding how do you go to market in a market like Japan. It's so different, Monday, if you think about most companies going to market in the West, LinkedIn is a thing. And you've got LinkedIn marketing. You can find people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's not a real thing in Japan. I think it's quite limited. Most people that use LinkedIn are probably people working for Western companies or people that have come there. And so there's different platforms, different technologies that you have to get your head around, different ways of doing business. And so that's really appreciating that culture of how things get done there. But then bring, and this is the bicultural part to it, is bring that DNA that has made you successful into Japan. So we look for people that can move fast, because it's not a typical Japanese cultural trait. It's very precise and deliberate, and things take a long time. But we need a middle ground. We need people that are going to get things done quickly and execute quickly. Different again when we go to India, and I spend time in Bangalore. Again, it's just appreciating, okay, well, how do we build a company and how do we build a brand that feels like a local brand and feels like a local company, but at the same time has our DNA in it as well.
And just really curious, you kind of touched on some of the cultural, even sort of language barriers that exist. I had several conversations over the last few sort of weeks, months, years around just, a lot of the times when, Australian companies think about expansion overseas, a lot of it tends to be in the US and maybe a little bit of the UK and Europe. But there is a really big opportunity within Asia as well, and especially for the right type of company, being able to own the space in general kind of makes it a really interesting strategic move when you're kind of thinking about kind of winning on the global landscape or, making yourself look attractive from an acquisition perspective. But question is two parts, like why specifically Japan out of all of the countries in that region? And I guess like what are some of the like less obvious challenges of expanding into this area?
Why Japan? I mean, that's an interesting one in of itself, because I remember challenging our CRO at the time, because I said, hey, there's much easier markets in Asia to go pursue. I said, let's go to Singapore before we go to Japan. It's an English-speaking market, a little bit more Western in its business culture. There's not that much of a heavy lift for us to go do that. He's like, no, like Japan, it's like the second largest software market in the world. It's a significant market, and we want to crack into it. And look, I think Monday does like to lean into the hard things. It's not about taking the easy route, but it's like really lean into the challenge and then figure out how do you solve for that. I suppose that, and it appeals to me intellectually in a way, as maybe it's like my, computer engineer brain, where you're trying to like problem solve. So you're just trying to figure out like what's the, how do I codify this thing? What's the thing that I got to solve for? And I think like, our founders as well are like really passionate about that market. When I speak to people about Monday in Japan, I think there's a head and a heart connection. I think there's, the head is like, it makes sense. If you can crack that market, it can be a very large business for you. I think Box, for instance, I think Japan is their second largest market globally after the US, right? And there's some great instances of companies that have been able to really win that market. There's a lot of companies that have tried, and they've had to persist for a very long time, and very significant companies, and they still haven't quite got it right. I think the things that people don't maybe appreciate when they're going into these markets is what I call the below the waterline things, like the infrastructure that you have to you have to really go to work on to be able to win in that market. So, if I talk about it from a SaaS perspective, it's like, well, are you prepared to do the work on localizing your product? And it's not language translation, it's like true localization of your product. And so there's a lot of work that has to get done there. Billing infrastructure. Now, it might seem straightforward, but if I think about markets like India, it's like quite challenging. It's very regulated. It's changing all the time. So how do you go to work and have that billing infrastructure in place? Local laws and regulations, the ability to hire people, the ability to part ways with people. I think all of that sits sort of below that waterline in terms of that, those things that maybe you might not be thinking through, or you might think through it and it might seem obvious, but once you get into it, it's actually like quite hard work.
I do want to take a little bit of a step back because from what I understand, before Dropbox and Monday, you had a company that you co-founded. I spoke to Greg, who was your co-founder in the business and a long-term friend as well, who, again, from what I understand, just came up to you over beers and just said, hey, what do you think about this idea? And you said you were in. What was that kind of decision-making process like?
Well, he shortcut that from, beers to saying I'm in. I think it took quite a while for me to make that decision. At the time, I had been at Microsoft for 11 years, but I always had this itch that I wanted to like really explore, which is being an entrepreneur and being a founder. And in fact, pre that startup, I had also built a product, and I was this decision path. And I remember I'd built a product and ended up having the Commonwealth Bank. They were interested in the product because they had a product called My Wealth, and there was a gap in their product portfolio. This product that I'd built, was a good complement to that. They wanted to go through due diligence, and I remember just thinking about it. I was like, hold on, I'm like one guy. I've built a product. I just don't have the resources to go through DD with the Commonwealth Bank. And it was the CIO at the time. I went back to him and I said, look, I won't follow through. I'm not resourced to go through due diligence of the CBA. And he came back and said, oh, look, I'm still really interested. Like, let's catch up for some drinks and we can chat about it. And even if I invest in the company, I was like really interested in what you've built out. And we ended up catching up. And then I came to this decision, and I was like, well, and my wife and I were trying to have children. We've been trying for a while. And I just knew that startup journey, it's not something you just sort of, go into casually. It's going to be really intense. And I went back to him. I said, look, I'm not going to do it, because I was like, in my mind, I was like, I can have a family or I can have a business. Right now, I'm going to choose having a family because I can start a business anytime. We ended up having our eldest daughter, started the family. And then it was 2 years after that, Greg came to me with this idea, and I was like just constantly giving them advice from the sides. Well, build out an MVP, don't go all in, build it on this stack. I can maybe knock something together for you guys. And I ended up doing that. And then they were persistent. They said, look, we need a CTO, come and join us on this journey. And then that's when I decided, right, now's the time. Let me just go all in and be an entrepreneur and be a founder. And so we did that for a couple of years, and there's a lot of learnings. And I will say, for founders, it's like, I feel like, it's very rare that you succeed with like your first venture, but I do feel like every time you do it, like you 10x yourself. So the first time I had that first startup, I learned how to build a product. And then the second time around, I was like, all right, I got that in my kit bag. Now I'm going to learn how to build a business and learn how to get that product to market in a scalable way, learn how to raise capital, do all of these things. And so again, like you said, like 10x yourself again in terms of all the experience and all the knowledge. And it's true, like you learn on the job. I mean, like that's where you really get those skills.
Just really curious, as you kind of mentioned, I feel like every startup and business that you kind of do, or just even just project that you play around with, I think you just pick up so much from that. What were some of the key lessons for you that in hindsight, you wish that you kind of approached differently with the startup, or things that you might have done differently knowing what you know now?
I think we spent way too much time playing the game of startup as opposed to like actually getting stuff done. And what I mean by that is, if you think about the hours that we spent on getting t-shirts designed and getting, logos designed, not being frugal enough. Like, we were saying, all right, we're going to get an office, so we're going to go get a WeWork space. And in hindsight, it was like all of that just like wasn't moving the bar. Like that was really, the 1%. And you can just spend so much time in that 1% as opposed to, build something, get it out there, get it into the hands of prospective customers, get them to pay for it. Because I think that's where like the truth comes out is like, are people willing to part with their money? Get the feedback. Yeah. So that was one of the things is just, don't focus on the 1% stuff. Focus on the things that makes impact. And then I think the other thing for me is don't try to build out everything. Yeah. Like we just spent so much time building capability that just really didn't matter, as opposed to going let's focus on one thing, just do it really well, and then iterate on that, and then we can go and build the next thing. If it's really meaningful and so on. So I think not like spreading yourself too thin. One of my colleagues has got the saying about marketing to the square inch, not the square mile, which I like because it talks about that focus. It's like build one thing, like build it, do it really well, and then from there, you'll see signal for other adjacent opportunities and so on. If I think about like Monday, when I joined the company, it was a single product company. It was a work management product, single product. But then over time, started seeing the signal. So like tens of thousands of people were using Monday for a CRM. And then that's when the company decided to build the CRM product, right? And in 2 years, it's just phenomenal, the growth that we saw. And I think that can apply to so many startup businesses. Like once you get some scale, you just start seeing some quality signal. And then it's like, how do you jump on that, right? And I think having the gumption and the wherewithal to like actually pursue those opportunities and not just like rest on it a little bit, like get after it, go build an MVP and see if there's some real value in that.
We're going to take a very quick break from this podcast to talk about one of our partners, Vanta. So if you're building a SaaS business and want to quickly unlock growth and build customer trust, one way to do this is by achieving compliance with SOC 2, ISO 27001, CPS 234, Essential 8, or other in-demand compliance frameworks. However, this process is often time-intensive and very costly. Vanta automates up to 90% of compliance, making you audit ready quickly and saving you up to 85% of associated costs. And not only that, Vanta scales with your business. With a market-leading trust management platform to help you continuously monitor compliance, unify risk management, and streamline security reviews. You can join over 8,000 global companies like Atlassian, Dovetail, and Indebted that use Vanta to build trust and prove security in real time. As a listener of the show, you can get up to $1,000 US off Vanta when you head over to vanta.com/demo. All right, let's get back to the episode. I think that kind of call about focus is so key, but so hard to do in practice. Yeah. Not just in terms of going like I should call up customers or those sort of things, but I think, what you kind of touched on in terms of focusing on one key thing. I love that quote that you have about, focusing on the square inch rather than the square mile. And I think one of the challenges for startup founders is you're just wildly optimistic and have this like grand vision for what this could look like in 10 years. Yeah. And distilling that into something really tangible and small is really, really hard. And often, one of the really sort of challenging parts of doing well in some ways, so whether it's with your career or those sort of things, is like you do get a ton of opportunities that come your way. So even when you launch something sometimes, or you speak to a customer that wants to tell you that you should build a different set of features that aren't really going to be core to what you're building, but you kind of end up focusing on that and shifting away from the type of business that you want to build anyway. Is there any practice or habits that you have, or like how you sort of think about that in terms of being able to really cut out the noise and really distill on the focus parts that are really important?
I want to pick up on a point that you raised. Is like, I think there's so much power in having a big vision. I call them big, hairy, audacious goals, right? And then having an intention around it, and then just pursue that in a very, I'd almost say, stubborn way. It's like, I'm going to get there. I think, for me at Monday, when it was just myself, I built a vision and a plan, and I said, right, we're going to build the next leading SaaS company in Asia. And my big, hairy, audacious goal was we weren't going to build the next Google or AWS overnight, but I thought it was very feasible that in 5 years I could build the next DocuSign, the next Dropbox. And I had clarity in my mind. It's like, well, 100 million in revenue, about 100 people. Okay, let's get after it. And then put that intent behind it. So for me, I think that's really important, because I think if you don't have that thing that you're anchoring yourself to, I think it's very easy to get swayed by, what's this opportunity, what's that opportunity, or what's this thing I could be building. So having that goal and that vision and that intention and being really clear on that, I think just keeps you on that track, keeps you motivated, gets you through the difficult times. For me, recruiting people during COVID, when Monday.com wasn't really a brand in this part of the world. I think, as a brand, it was number 5 or 6 in its category. I remember when the recruiter called me, he said, there's this company, Monday.com, wanted to set up in Australia. Are you interested to have a chat? And I was like, who's Monday.com? He goes, oh, you might know them as DePulse. I was like, oh, I know DePulse because I used it in building Hum. It was I was using it as my roadmap software and so on. So that clarity around where you're going, I think, for me, it doesn't come in naturally to focus. I'm creative. I am entrepreneurial at heart. So I do like all the new shiny things, and I want to pursue it. So I know that about myself. So then I have to be quite disciplined and just go, right, how do I consolidate it down? How do I consolidate it down to something that's really simple and something that I can articulate to other people? I can articulate it to my team. Maybe if you're a founder and you're raising capital, how do you articulate that in a very clear, concise way to people that you're talking to in terms of raising funds, right? So, yeah. So that's probably my thing, is just actually just ask myself, am I being focused enough, or am I trying to pursue way too many different things?
You kind of touched on Monday, not being really well known. And I think that's something, if you look at it now, seems kind of obvious. I think most people in the ecosystem would have heard of Monday, which is, testament to the work that you and the team have done. But, back when you joined, I think you've kind of mentioned previously that Monday was probably the 5th or 6th in its category in Australia. You were at Dropbox at the time. Yep. What was it sort of about the product, the opportunity, those sort of things that made it the right thing for you to go after?
I loved that it was like a 0 to 1 situation, right? I was the first person and I was going to build it. Right, and that again spoke to the entrepreneur in me and says, okay, that's great. I can go and really build something. So that was probably the main thing. The product has to resonate. There were other companies that approached me, and I was like, I just couldn't get excited about their product or their platform or what it was doing in the market or what it represented. And so that was the other component for me. It was like, okay. Is the product something that I could get really excited about? And then probably the third thing is that culture. So who are the founders? What's their DNA? What's the company all about? And that was appealing to me as well. I like to characterize Monday. It's like a T-Rex in a teddy bear outfit, and it's a very driven, ambitious company, and so that appeals to me. The teddy bear outfit is is a very warm brand, a very engaging brand, very warm culture, very engaging culture. And so I think it's those two things in balance that also appealed to me as well. It wasn't too much of a capitalist company. It wasn't too much of a socialist company. It was that right balance.
And, you kind of touch on this in terms of your own sort of personal drive and motivation for joining Monday. As you mentioned, the challenging part of kind of convincing other people to join who probably haven't heard of the company before as well can be really, really difficult. What did the early stages of that look like? Because I imagine, especially hiring through COVID, there is probably a group of people that have been sort of laid off and are looking for opportunities that would be a little bit easier. But I imagine a lot of really good people that are, in probably very happy work environments and those sort of things, and having the fear of like not knowing what's kind of happening during lockdown would extenuate how difficult attracting that sort of best talent looks like. What did that period look like in building out that initial team?
I'm smiling because I'm thinking about one of the conversations I had with one of our early hires. And as you say, it was during COVID, right? So people don't want to leave secure jobs and environments to go join a company that may or may not be in the market in 2 years' time, that may or may not be successful. And I remember the recruiter saying, right, you've got this guy here, he's close, but he's not sure. And I knew it's just like a gun talent. Like I just knew that I need to get this person in the business. So I was actually quite nervous when I got on the phone because it was like a call where I needed to close him out. But I think it was the vision. It was, setting this vision around, we're going to build the next leading SaaS company in Asia. And my conviction around that, I think that carried through in that conversation. And then their opportunity in that, their role in that, right? And I think that appealed to the right DNA at that time, people that were builders, people that wanted to roll up their sleeves and go through that journey. And I think, interesting enough, probably the first 5 or so hires had been through that journey in other companies, and they enjoy it. They enjoy that, thriving in that chaos, but also being able to have impact and see your impact, right?
Has what you've kind of looked for, the type of talent that you attracted at the start, changed at all to what it's like when you're 140 people?
I think it changes in some respects based on where we need to take the business and what sort of experience we need for that. But I think in the core DNA of the 3 traits that I look for in people, that's really consistent. I look for intellectual horsepower. I think people that can use their brain power to solve problems, that can figure out creative solutions. There's just so much currency in that, right? And you are problem solving all the time, and you're using your smarts to try to figure out how to break into a new market. How do we bring a new product to market? All of these things. People that are driven, that have that get up and go, and are really passionate about the company, very passionate about the product, very passionate about their customers, their partners. That comes through. And then the last one, I'd say people that are low ego or humble. They're good people to work with. I think Steve Jobs, he said that saying is, stay hungry, stay foolish. Probably, captures all of that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Are there specific ways that you test for those qualities within your interview process?
It's quite challenging. I think, how do you test for intellectual horsepower, right? So I think some of it is obvious. It jumps out the page. You can have a look at what people are interested in. What did they do in terms of their studies? Is there something there that really comes out of it? Can they think quickly on their feet? I like to ask questions that will challenge people and just see how quickly they think on their feet. In terms of the drive, I typically look for people that have faced some sort of challenge in their past. Something that they've had to really persevere and work through. And can they do they have that in their DNA? They can make things happen, and they'll figure out a way. Like me, when I left uni, .com bus, I was like, right, I'm gonna go find a job and just cold call companies, looking for those opportunities. And you can see that in people. I think that works really well. I think the low ego or the humbleness, again, it's just how do they present themselves? Are they full of bravado, which is okay. I mean, that doesn't make someone a bad person, but I think some people, you can see that big ego. How do they take feedback? I'll normally test that in an interview process as well, is give them some constructive feedback to see how they take it on. Defensive, or do they roll with that as well?
Yeah. I'm really curious in terms of, I've never asked this question before of anyone, but I think that for every strength that someone has, there is a counterbalance to that. So I guess having specific qualities that you sort of really value, I guess on the other side, are there less favorable parts of that you are willing to accept or kind of think about in terms of how do you sort of navigate that kind of comes from someone that spikes in some of those areas? So, for example, if they're really used to being hungry and kind of getting things done, they might not be as well organized or haven't necessarily thought things through, or someone who's overtly humble might find it difficult to think bigger around things.
Yeah. It's a good point. I mean, if I reflect on myself, I can't say I'm a very organized person, right? And so, but I know that about myself. So I surround myself with people, or I have people on my team that will counterbalance that and that will complement that. So I think in terms of team construction, it's easy because then you can think, well, you know, I've got people that think in this way and I need someone that can complement and bring that together. I think at an individual level, you know, are there some things that you would go, you know, that's okay. I think if someone's going to have traits that would disrupt the team, I'd say that would be like a hard no, right? Because we're building a team, and I think about what we do. It's like professional sports, right? So there's definitely a hard no on people that won't fit in the team. So that team chemistry for me is really, really important. I think people that won't do maybe the low work, that's a bit of a hard no as well. Because I talk about sweeping the sheds, right? That's an All Blacks thing. I think that's something that I don't think is a fit. Yeah, some people are perfectionists and they say that. They go, like one of my traits is I'm a perfectionist, and I think you can roll with that. You can say, okay, well then where do we direct your efforts, right? It's like being a perfectionist in terms of attention to detail is great. Yeah, I think we've got some people on our team that, if I think about the events that we run at Monday, like that attention to detail and that perfectionist trait is brilliant, right? Like world class in terms of the execution of that. But if we need someone to run really fast and just be comfortable with breaking things, or it's a very chaotic environment, maybe I'm bringing a new product to market in the region, or we're going to do some new go-to-market. You want someone that can just roll with it pretty quickly and figure it out along the way, and they're not a perfectionist. So I think it's, in a long way, I think it's situational, because I'll look at what's the team, but also look at the role and go, well, can that for lack of a better word, flaw, like work well for us in that instance.
Yeah. And you kind of referenced the plan that you had, or kind of like the big, hairy, audacious goal that you had for the company, which was trying to get to 100 mil in 5 years, which, to give some context, I from what I believe, Monday.com was 120 million as an entire business at the time.
Yes, yeah. So it did seem like quite a far-fetched idea when I presented it.
Which I guess is a point of setting like a really big sort of vision for people to kind of attach themselves to and work towards. But I guess that's one part of it. I had Adam Schwab, who I don't know if you've come across him before, but founder of Luxury Escapes, who mentioned that he kind of stepped away from the company for a period, came back with a sort of renewed vision, was a 10x version of himself because he could kind of pull himself out and look at the bigger picture, and pivoted the entire business. And they went from 350 million before COVID to over $1 billion in sales. But he said that, part of convincing other people was kind of having this very clear plan that he took people through. Yeah. What did that plan look like for you of going from, it's easy to say we'll get to 100 million in 5 years. What did that sort of look like in terms of inputs or execution or things that you needed to get in place to realize that goal? Yeah.
Look, I thought about it in like the big rocks, Rohit, would be building a team, right? And so how do we build a world-class team? And so obviously that's a key component to be able to hire great talents and put them in the right roles and be able to just execute that. I think that's obvious. I think most people think about that. Probably what's not obvious, or some of my mistakes, is maybe not parting ways with people that were bad hires in that early phase, right? And being able to move quicker on that. The second part is building that brand. How do we build a brand? And for me, that was like a real 360-degree approach, because I had to think about, well, how are we showing up in search? Are we, if someone searches for a certain term, are we showing up there? How are we showing up if they search for our competitors? Are we there? Getting into the weeds on that. I was thinking about how we were showing up on review sites, because I was like, well, if we're not in the top 3, when someone's looking at a review site or was looking at a Gartner, they're probably not we're going to miss out on a whole lot of traffic, if you like, coming our way. And I had to go to work on that. G2 Crowd, by the way, like, I don't think there was anyone in Monday globally that owned G2 Crowd. So here I'm in Australia and I'm going to Australia. I'm like, we need to get up on G2 Crowd. We need to be in like top right-hand box. Give me some money. I'm going to start just running things. So like in my night times, I was on G2 Crowds, like rewriting our posting, and they've got a thing where you give people vouchers and you can run campaigns. I was just all about that, just getting us up on G2 Crowd. Thinking about PR, and PR sort of cut both ways. It helped us in the market with our brand to customers, but it also helped us attract talent. It's like, here we are in the AFR. This is what we want to do. The other area was, if I think about winning that square inch, we got really focused on, okay, well, what industry can we really become famous in? What industry can we own? And I actually had a pivot, because the plan, I'd done some work and I looked at a whole lot of like McKinsey data around digital maturity and growing industries and all that. And I was on, I think I settled on like 3 industries, and then retail was actually quite low on that. So retail wasn't a priority, but then we started seeing the strong signal and we pivoted really quickly. And it's like, right, we're going to go after retail. We're going to figure out the DNA of what are our use cases. And then, we just became really great at that industry. And I think that helped our brand as well, because then people started knowing Monday through that particular industry and the use cases. And then another part of it was being an Australian company, being seen as an Australian brand. So we have all these amazing Australian brands that are Monday customers. I remember when we had our first customer event, I had Tourism Australia up there talking about how they used Monday to run and sort of plan and execute the campaign that they had run. We had Canva talking about how they were using Monday. We had the event in the Opera House, and the Sydney Opera House was a Monday customer. And so it was just great just to bring all that together. So it had like a very strong Australian feel. So being seen as like a brand in this country, I think that really helped us. So yeah, I think building the team, building our brands, and then I think the go-to-market plan was about like, where could you focus with the resources that you have, and how do you focus on market maximization, but not being too rigid with that plan as well. Right? Like constantly going, well, you know what, like I built this plan, it was great on paper, but the signal I'm getting, it's like I was off base, and being able to just pivot that a little bit and go, okay, well, that's not working. We just shut that down and then we get on to the next thing. Right. And again, I think that's part of the DNA of Monday. And what made Monday really successful is like they had that sort of approach to performance marketing. Put a campaign out, they would put investment behind it, but they'd get like a really strong early pulse or signal around whether or not that was going to give us a return on investment, and they would shut that down and then they'd go on to the next one. And that sort of became like the internal AI of Big Brain, which is like where do you focus your efforts, and where do you persist, and where do you shut that down? And I think that really helps with early execution and that journey onto the 0 to 100 million. I like that what we share with about Adam Schwab, like just stepping back and be able to like get perspective, and I think that's super important. Like my aha moments, my best ideas around either the roles that we've created or the pivots that we've made at Monday have always come from just being able to go out for a walk and just chew the fat mentally and just get those aha moments. But then I'd come back and I'm excited about it, and I'd say like, right, let's execute it. Like, we got this thing, let's get it done as quick as possible and go with it.
Yeah. I think a lot of the time a lot of the really good advice is counterintuitive to what you think you should do in the moment. So if you have like a long list of things, the most obvious thing is like you've just got to stay in the grind and keep doing it. But sometimes the most valuable thing can be stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, or like you said, going for a walk. As I mentioned, I spoke to Greg, who was one of your co-founders, and one of the things that he mentioned about your superpower was just your ability to absorb information and kind of action and execute that. And he also mentioned that you guys have been speaking a lot recently about AI specifically, and I know this is a real sort of interesting kind of topic and area for you. Just really curious about how you're sort of thinking about both the implementation of AI and what that sort of looks like in the future for Monday.
Yeah, so I think for me personally, if I pick up a topic, I get really immersed in it, right? So podcasts are a great medium. So if I'm washing the dishes, I'm listening to podcasts. If I'm driving in the car, I'm listening to podcasts. So I'm like really voracious with that. And so that's, from an AI perspective, and it's changing so rapidly. I mean, despite the fact that, I did a university degree in AI back in 2001, and I was, writing, speech recognition systems and all that sort of stuff. It's changing at an incredible pace right now. And I remember David Shane. I think did you have David Shane on the show?
Yeah, I've had him
once?
on 2 or 3 times.
Okay, all right, popular guest. I had David come in to talk to my team at Microsoft at the time, and we were going through that sort of cloud journey. And I remember he said something. He goes, there's 3 types of people in the world. There's people that make things happen. There's people that watch things happen. And then there's people that say, what happened? Right. And I think we're in this like generational moment with AI. It is moving so fast, but then there's these like markers which you have to sit back and go, wow, like what is the future going to be like? And am I watching it happen, or am I making it happen, or am I going to say what happened? They announced Stargate a couple of weeks ago in terms of the infrastructure investment in the US. And I understand that is the biggest infrastructure project or investment in human history. So just that in of itself, it's got to make you sit up and go, wow, like, I need to really understand what's going on, and I need to participate in that. So for me, listening to podcasts and then understanding what technologies are out there, what are people using for their own personal and professional productivity, and then getting hands-on with it. So I've got, when you think about GPTs and large language models, I've got Perplexity AI, I've got Claude Sonnet 3.5, I've got Gemini with deep research, I've got OpenAI, the reasoning models. I'm like using everything, and I'm just like absorbing. It's like, all right, what's good? How do you use it? And how do you be productive with it? And so on a personal basis, I think there's amazing power in that. I remember sitting in a account planning meeting the other day, and our account manager, to building an account plan it takes days or weeks, to pull something really solid together. And he was presenting it, and I was thought, let me just use one of the reasoning models to see if I can build an account plan. And in 5 minutes, it went out 70 websites. It read the company's annual plan. It went to their website. It found what does Monday.com do in this space? What case studies do you have? And it's just, you think about all that information that's just absorbed, it analyzed it. And I said, right, I'm an account manager, produce an account plan for this account. And as the person was presenting the account plan, I was like validating against what I had. And then I said, well, what about this? And what about that? And they're like, that's really good. That's a great idea. But it's just in my mind is like an exercise that can take 2 weeks, I can now do in 5 minutes. And you just think about the enormous potential, the unlock, right? So instead of building that account plan for 2 weeks, I can maybe build it in 5 minutes, add a few more things and go execute it. I can get into the execution phase a lot quicker. So there's that. And look, and I think about our company, I'm thinking about building now $1 billion business, 10xing the business in Asia in the next 5 years. And there's things that we're going to do very differently compared to the previous 5 years. But the big opportunity, the thing that I'm really excited about, not only for our company, but the entire industry and also just the world at large, is what is the potential that we've got ahead of us? And am I going to be a participant in that? I'm really excited about what Monday's doing, right? Because we just announced the other day the launch of our AI capabilities, and I think Monday is pretty sound in it because they're covering a few areas, right? So in one instance, we've built AI as blocks in our platform, and that's allowing our customers and future customers to bring AI automation and intelligence to their workflows. So they're going to be able to upgrade all of their workflows and bring that into their daily work. We also have what we call these AI power-ups. So if you're in the product, you can have an AI sitting there. If you think about from a project management perspective, the AI can flag risk proactively. So Rohit, you're going to have a resource challenge here in a couple of days' time because this person's going away. He has probably an alternative match, best fit match that you can get ahead of that. Or there's some bottlenecks that you can't see in 2 weeks' time, but this is coming pretty quickly. We've also released an AI first product. So Monday Service, which is our latest product offering, is the first product where we've built it with AI right at the forefront, and that's pretty exciting in terms of that innovation. And then the last area is the digital workforce. So we've got these AI agents, for lack of a better term, that we're building out. So, personas like a marketer, an SDR, a project manager, all that sort of thing. So I think it's really exciting with all of that for Monday. But I think also, again, coming to that sort of those three types of people, do I want to be a person that's going to make it happen? Or do I want to be a person that's going to watch it happen? And I think it's an incredible opportunity. Or am I going to be the person that said, what happened? And in 2 years' time, go, wow, I just missed so much.
Sender is the OG startup accounting firm in Australia, catering to all stages of your business life. If you're busy running a business, you don't always have the time to do your own books and forecasts, and instead you can fully outsource your finance function so that you have the time and resources back to do what you do best, which is growing your business. They have a dedicated focus on founders, funds, and startups, and have an experienced team that can help you with everything from managing your tax to balancing your books to even helping with your exit strategy. I trust and use them with all of my businesses and can't recommend them highly enough. To find out more or to speak to Gareth and the team, head over to sender.com. All right, let's get back to this episode. When we kind of first met at one of the Monday.com events, you were talking a little bit about your own personal journey with kind of health and what that sort of looked like. What was the catalyst for you in terms of, going on that journey? And for listeners, you showed me a photo as well. You've lost 20 kilos, which is incredible. But what was that kind of journey like for you?
So I think what was the catalyst? I think for me, the catalyst is how do I sustain myself? And as I've grown the business, it's more and more demanding. It's more demanding of my time, my mental clarity. And so it really draws on you both mentally as well as physically. And just taking a look at myself and go can I stay the course? Am I built and put together in a way that's going to bring the best of myself? And I think that for me was a catalyst. And I think health, it has those two legs to it. It's your mental health and it's your physical health as well. And it was a journey of those two together. Early in our journey, Monday, I lost a colleague of ours who, he joined me from Dropbox, and we for all intents and purposes, set up Monday here together, and he took his own life. And, I think that left a mark. It's it definitely left the scar in that. So I think for me, I spent a lot of time consciously thinking about am I mentally in a good place? Am I filling my cup? Right? Is the team around me in a good place? Are they filling their cup? Right? Are they doing things that are going to help them sustain? Or are they, just wearing themselves out? Right? So I think that is a catalyst for that. And then just being fit. I've got 2 young kids. I've got a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, and they always want to play, and they always want to they're super active. And I was like, okay, can I stay with them? Can I keep up with them? And can I keep up with the business? And coming back to the power of that intention, because I think that's what I did. I was like, right, my big, hairy, audacious goal is I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. The best shape of my life was when I was at university and I met my wife, and, I was super fit. I was like doing martial arts, and I was going to the gym and all of that good stuff. So I was like, right, I'm going to get back to that. Right. And then taking action. Right. So I was like, okay, I'm going to invest in a trainer. I signed up for a personal trainer, like super expensive, but I was like, okay, like if I'm serious about this, I'm going to like really get behind it and then be persistent. Like I actually didn't give myself a time frame on that one. I was just like, however long it takes. Cause I think, on that basis, sometimes, I think I self-sabotage by trying to expect too much in too short a time. And, it's been, so far it's a 2-year journey, and I am in the best shape of my life. I'm like back to what I was, how much I weighed back at uni days. My trainer still wants to push more. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
No, I love that, and such an incredible story. Yeah. And, sorry to hear about your team member that sadly took his own life. And, I think the unfortunate thing for a lot of people in this space is, we're so driven by work and driven by the clear focus of this big goal that we've set for ourselves, for the business, and all of those sort of things that a lot of the time we're making trade-offs that we don't often realize. And it is unfortunate sometimes it takes something really big to give us a wake-up call. But I think, like you said, it's kind of important to be sort of mindful and intentional about what is it that we're kind of doing all of this for. And, in terms of you kind of having that, I'll call it a wake-up call, not your words, but mine, but having that sort of wake-up call moment and having that intention to get into the best shape of your life. What did that look like? And what does that look like from, like you said, you've got a young family, you've got an extremely demanding work life. What does your schedule routine sort of look like to help you prioritize and make sure you're on track of that long term? Yeah.
So having that trainer just absolutely changed the game, because there's an accountability, and she takes measurements and photos every 2 weeks. I can see the progress, which actually, that's motivation, because like once you see it over time, when you see the journey over time and you look back, you just actually have a lot more clarity around how far you've really come, and then that gives you more fuel to get up and go and get further along that road. I think the other thing is, for me, my PT sessions are in my diary, and that's sacred. Like there's very few things that will move that around, right? And it's there, it's planned, and I protect that time. And then not being like too hard on myself. I'm not trying to be a monk, right? It's like really trying to think about, okay, I'm on this journey. It's over a longer period of time. I can live my life, and I can enjoy things in moderation, and I think that served me well as well.
I found personally, you kind of like touched on setting like a really big goal. Like for me, it's always a time-based thing. So if I remove the time pressure off, I feel like I've got to hit this milestone, or I need to be successful straight away, or I need to like, I started to take my fitness really seriously. I'm like, why don't I have a 6-pack in 3 weeks? Good luck. And more sort of thinking about it from that journey of like, for me, it's like, what will this look like in 10 years? I've found kind of takes the pressure off the day-to-day sort of thing, because it's inevitable that sometimes you're traveling, sometimes like things come up, and it's easy when you kind of set this very time-based or kind of expect immediate results, that if you don't see things straight away, you lose the motivation, like easily jump off. But if you kind of shift perspective and go, this is actually a marathon. We're trying to be here for 5 years and longer, and you've got kids you want to continue playing with for a long time, and all those sort of things. I think it kind of helps remove that pressure and looking at it more from a lifestyle shift perspective, rather than like a results-based thing that you're kind of measuring hour by hour.
But I mean, there's power in time-based goals, right? So I mean, my trainer does like set markers along the way. She's like, okay, like by this date, let's try get to here. So she's constantly pushing me, doesn't let me rest on my laurels, which is good. Like you need that a little bit, but I think in the grand scheme of things, is just also understanding how you're wired and what's going to be the thing that sabotages you, and trying to like counter that or take that off the table.
Yeah. And I think the other really powerful part of this, especially as a leader within this, is I remember with my last company, I felt terrible about taking any time away to work out, do exercise, whatever. I'm like, everyone's working really hard. I've got a million things on my plate. The idea of taking time away for myself was just such a big sort of mental barrier that I had to overcome. And then as soon as I, like you said, I kind of started booking out 90 minutes at lunchtime every day and told everyone in a team meeting, I'm like, I'm happy to make myself available any other time, but this time I'm going to go work out every single day, thinking that there would be a negative reaction to that. But actually it kind of, other people are like, oh, maybe I should go for a walk, or maybe I'll kind of do other things as well during that time. What's that been like for you from a overall kind of team perspective in terms of seeing your own journey? Is that kind of instilled or kind of been reflected into how your sort of team starts thinking about this stuff as well?
Yeah, I think we've got a really fit, active team at Monday. I think, one of the team members was asking me yesterday, Dean, when are you going to come to Barry's boot camp? And they go book out 30 slots and all of them go down there, or they go run a JP Morgan marathon. So, and I've seen that it has changed over the years. Maybe that's a bit of that culture that's coming through for myself. I know, Monday, they're really focused on the sort of snacks that we have around the office. And I think that comes through our founders around, do we have healthy snacks? What are we surrounding ourselves with? So there's a bit of that sort of founder shadow on, healthy living. Yeah, as a company investing in things like our Monday clinic, which is, we've got a full-time access to a psychologist, and someone that we can go see. It can be related to some sort of life event that you're struggling with, or it could just be related to, hey, I'm trying to get this breakthrough at work, and, these are some of the things that are holding me back. So I think that's there. And, we invest in ClassPass and we have that available. So I think all of the structures are there. But yeah, maybe it's just when you see the people around you, there's something that activates you that, you go, well, yeah, okay, I'm encouraged to do it, or I've been given the permission to go do that. So if people see me go to the gym, they're like, oh, it's okay. That's the permission that we have. Yeah.
I love the approach that you guys take as well in terms of just removing the friction as much as possible. So even I think for a lot of people, I found it really difficult. I'd get to the end of the day and I've got no time, and I'm out of energy. But when you kind of go, well, if time's the issue, I will block out time to do this, and that is my time to go. It just removes all of the excuses from it. So I love the intentionality between how you guys sort of think about that in terms of supporting your teams as well. Yeah.
So it's building blocks to success, right? So just step up on that.
Absolutely. Dean, I can talk to you for hours, but
likewise.
But really appreciate you coming on. For anyone that wants to find out more, say hello, get in touch, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. So can reach out to me on LinkedIn. We also have monday.com, and put my email out there. It's a nice, easy one. It's dean@monday.com. I was the first Dean in the company, so won't be the last, but it's probably the best way to get hold of me.
Perfect. I will make sure all of those links are in the show notes. Dean, once again, absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Rohit.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to episode 207 of the Startup Playbook podcast. As always, full show notes from this episode will be available at startupplaybook.co. I'll be back next week with another episode, but in the meantime, if you enjoyed this interview, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.